And now, the survival show that once survived, making episodes with hashtag no pants, but only randomly, so you never know which one. In this episode, we sit down with Rory Miller. He's going to share with us some Jedi mind tricks, how you can see threats coming before they happen, and give us his thoughts on the wussification of society. Howdy and welcome to the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. This is episode number 271. I'm your host, Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Before we dive in, here's a little background on today's guest. Rory Miller is the author of 10 books, including Conflict Communication, Meditations on Violence, and Facing Violence. Rory Miller served for 17 years in corrections as an officer and sergeant, working maximum security, booking, and mental health. In 2010, he began collaborating with Mark McYoung for a police verbal de-escalation program. That program became CONCOM. Not just for police, CONCOM has been taught in 8 countries and to groups ranging from police academics to hospitals and factories. With that, Rory, welcome to In the Rabbit Hole.
It's good to be here, and I love that name.
Thanks. I appreciate it. So we've rattled off what an amazing ninja you are, and I also know how much that makes you uncomfortable.
Really?
So let's go here. What attracted you to the profession filled with violence and the potential for harm?
Freshly married and had a baby on the way, and I needed a job. I had applications in everywhere, and the one with corrections came through, so I took it.
I gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, that was quick. So we'll go here. There's a great quote you have in the book. As the fortune cookie says, your life is about to change. And I thought that was such a great statement. Let's see if we can do it justice here.
We had that fortune cookie taped up in booking. Right, where we put them at the counter, where we're taking their handcuffs off and gathering their property and reseating it. There's someone, and it was before I started working there. It was there for at least 20 years. There was a little fortune cookie says, "Your life has changed forever today."
I'm sure I imagine they didn't necessarily. Were they able to read it, or was that purely for y'all?
Yeah, it was right there.
Okay, all right. I think getting into this subject in particular, to me, is very important for a number of reasons. But I think to start here, everyone wants to focus on what to do once they're in the fight. What's the best gear? What's the best mind? What's the best martial art flavor of the day? It's the big sexy and the tactical and survival industry in general. Yeah. But hardly anyone really talks about, except usually a few old timers, and unfortunately nobody listens. There's a big part of diffusing or avoiding the fight altogether, and that becomes the unsung redheaded stepchild, conflict communication. But how effective is studying and implementing this unsung art?
It's, I want to say it's crazy effective and get into that, but honestly, it depends. There's some people, arrogant people are shitty at communicating, no matter the ones that already think that they know it. It doesn't matter. The people that thinks it's a bag of tricks, and this goes with fighting too. If you've got this bag of tricks, there's something artificial about the way you try to implement them. And they tend to fail physically and verbally. If you go, I'm going to, I notice that you have your right arm across, so I'm going to mirror that, and I'm going to tilt my head the same way you do and try to match. And that works right up until you catch me doing it, and you think I'm mocking you. And so, one of the things we talked about this a little bit before the show, that people are entranced with the fighting stuff. The stuff that's least likely allows the most fantasy. So you can train in something you like and just tell yourself over and over that the stuff I like also happens to be the stuff that's most necessary. But communication, a lot less illusions. It's we do it every day. Most people are competent at it, but because it's not conscious and because it's not focused, they don't get good. And there's do you ever listen to the Freakonomics podcast?
Every once in a while.
Every so often they pop in, and it's just a theme that comes up every so often, and when people attach morality to something. And so there is a big segment of people I've run into who thinks if you get skillful at communication, you're in some way cheating.
Mm-hmm.
That manipulation is inherently bad. And all communication is manipulation. I have to get something out of my head into your head. I have to put it there in some way. And I just significantly rather it was skillful than unskillful. There's a whole bunch more heartache and violence for that matter and everything that comes from misunderstanding than from clarity. And clarity is a skill.
And I think one of the things I was happy to see come up in the book was that a lot of people come to you, or either after a seminar or after a coaching session or after reading the book, and talk about how the understanding conflict communication has helped them in every area of their life, or at least we should actually point out the most important areas of their life, be it personal relationships, work, just interacting with other human beings.
Yeah. When we did the beta test of the class, because what happened when the class originally started, Mark McYoung, I don't know if you know who he is. But back when I was, anyway, a long time ago, he's the first person I ever knew in a book that I read anyway that said that martial arts and self-defense were not the same. And this was, earth shaking at the time. A lot of crap. So, fast forward at least 10, probably 15 years later, and my first book came out, Meditations on Violence, and I get this phone call from this Mark McYoung guy. It's like, what? And he said that he had just done a de-escalation program in Germany for the police, and noticed a lot of his some of his phrasing was coming out of Meditations on Violence. So I'd be interested in doing a de-escalation program. And it's like, hell yeah, absolutely. So our intention was to put together a de-escalation program for police. And we did the beta test with mostly cops and friends and people that would tell us, I consider most of my friends to be honorable enemies, which means if I really like you, it's because I trust you to tell me when I'm full of shit. So we had a room full of people just eager to pounce. And the feedback we got at the end was this will work just fine for de-escalating the criminal element, but it explains my boss and my wife. And we had stumbled on something way bigger than we realized.
So, and I think one of the other things that I caught from the book, there was a sentence in particular: there is very little good science in the study of conflict. And I thought that was interesting because I hadn't really thought about that deeply. I mean, read a lot about fighting, seen a lot of stuff about fighting. There's a lot about love. There's a lot about all kinds of things, but conflict is left wanting. Why is that?
The primary reason is after you've heard of like the Milgram experiment and the Stanford prison experiment and all that.
Yeah.
After those, almost every university I know of instituted an ethics community to see if the experiment was going to mess with the students physically or emotionally. And since that time, you can't do we're going to do a thing on what happens to your reaction time when you're terrified, but you can't terrify them. It's a violation of the ethics standard. So we set these rules that makes it almost impossible to do experimental science. And this is my bias, but I'll defend it if anybody wants to. But if it's not experimental, it's not science. It's some version of natural history. You're just gathering anecdotes and hoping you can find a pattern. And that inability, and there's still a few natural experiments that run out, so we can look at like videos of knife attacks and see what the pattern is, and assign a statistical percentage to them. But to actually go and experiment, how do the average people, how does your reaction time under this adrenaline load versus this adrenaline load? How does surprise work? Where it's really hard to do science on that. So, and there's a crap ton of pseudoscience.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. There's a few areas that are similar to conflict communication that are loaded with pseudoscience, just like that.
I kind of want to share, don't want to. It's there is a group that exists that has a job that can't be talked about that has started using conflict communications. What amazed me about it is they've been doing this really, really important stuff for a long time, and it had never evidently occurred to them to systematize their basic job.
Hmm.
And I realize I just totally vagued you there.
But I think everybody gets what you're talking about. Yeah.
But it's one of those, if you found out that, something that you see on TV and you think they're super elite and awesome, you see hostage negotiators and realize that everyone was just kind of winging it, it would be a pretty freaky feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the concepts in there, like, or even, taking Gavin de Becker's forced teaming. Some people do it instinctively, but it was not something that they were teaching the people that were doing this job. It was a new concept to them. And I found that slightly terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, I think that speaks to a lot of things in life that nobody wants to see how the sausage is made, and things are never quite as well. There's a lot of areas of our lives that are not as well controlled as we would like them to be. Sort of the illusion often of certain situations or people or places or things that are more than they are.
I don't know if it gets me, if it's the controlled or the explored,
Mm-hmm.
because there are certain things that are so basic that people assume that they're good at them.
Mm-hmm.
My first sensei said that everyone walks and everyone breathes, and that's why they're so crappy at it. They don't think it was a skill.
Yeah.
And I'd stretch that to communication. It's like, until you start consciously looking at how you communicate and the effect that it has, you aren't looking for the feedback to improve.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start seeing patterns, then they're everywhere, and a whole bunch of things become easier.
Mm-hmm.
But it's weird how many super basic things we've never looked for the patterns.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think this is a funny thing. I mean, this can be said of just communication, definitely, but it can be said about just being in a relationship of any kind, and all these other things that people get a hang up about it. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier when you said and attributed it to arrogance. That it's like, oh, well, this is natural. You should just know how to do this. I was listening to somebody recently. We were talking about raising children, and they were like, well, you shouldn't have to read any books or anything like that. It should just come naturally. And it's like, well, really? I don't know. Then you don't get to use the excuse of, well, kid, you didn't come with a manual. And it's like, no, there's an entire library section on
the library.
rearing
and
children.
What you have to look at, because a lot of people who wrote that library didn't have kids. They were just guessing and pushing an agenda.
Yeah.
And, and that's the, I don't even know if he's still alive. How many people did Spock ruin?
Yeah.
Dr. Spock. Or, it's, but going back to something we talked about a little bit offline, for there's an entirely systemized system for starting relationships, but almost no one has ever looked at how to maintain a good relationship. Unless you have good role models in your own parents, it's you don't even realize this work. You're supposed to get to the happily ever after, and at that point, it's supposed to suddenly become easy.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's the weird hang up that all of these things that are fundamental everyday parts of our lives are just supposed to be natural, and perhaps it's a fear of admitting that maybe you're not as great at it as you think you are, and so then they aren't willing to study it. I think this kind of leads us there was two sections or two lines in the book that I think would be interesting to kind of compare and contrast. So one was, just like sex, conflict is a thing of emotion. And then another sentence was, the things that feel very personal are often impersonal. How do we reconcile those two things?
Okay. So the first one, sex conflict, there's a whole bunch of stuff that hits you at a very, very deep level. And it's not cognitive. And if you try to, there are very, very few good lovers who are thinking too much or in their head. It's very hard to spend a lot of time and be totally engaged with the person while thinking about your bills, your math problems, whatever's happening at work. And that is just, you have to be in the moment for both of them. conflict the same. If you try to intellectualize it, here talking, we can intellectualize it. We look at videos, we can go over our memories, we can talk about commonalities, we can do it. In the moment, if you try to use that part of your brain, you're going to go down. Um, so that's that first part of the question. The second, and this goes into, I have to do some ConCom talk here. One of the models in ConCom is that there's a part of your brain that solves problems. In the book we call it the human brain. It's really good at it. But there's a whole other level of a deeper brain that actually has more control, that's always worried about what the tribe thinks. What will they say? Is this the right thing to do? It's all the voices in your head that keep you from taking chances and risks and experimenting and a bunch of other things. Within that, we call that one the monkey brain. Many of the things are not personal, in the sense it's not you and me personal. It's a sense that someone said something, and you said something back. You don't even realize it's a script. Nowhere in here was your cognitive brain engaged. And at the end of that script, the other guy's an asshole. And to your monkey brain, he is an asshole is a complete explanation. But it's not about you. It's about who took that role in that script. And if you can change the script, then the feelings change. And that sounds a little esoteric, but if you've ever actually decided, I'm not going to be me today, I'm going to be someone else. One of the experiments, going back, when I was working the jail, my primary job was to make sure no bad things happened. And that meant calling people on their behavior. The job is to tell people, some of whom are incredibly violent, no, not going to happen today. If someone comes down as a voice of authority and starts ordering you around, how does it make you feel?
Inferior.
Okay, and if you have manhood issues, your next step is you have to prove that you aren't inferior, and we're already in fight mode. So sometimes I would sit there, I've got to stop this behavior. I need to confront him. But if I go down as an officer, knock that shit off, it's going to be on. So I would take a step back and go, okay, my primary goal is to not have this kid get in trouble. Okay, whether that's going to the hole, whether that's a fight, primary goal is nothing to happen. If I liked this kid, if I was his uncle, I would also want the same thing. So if I was his uncle, how would I phrase this? And I could literally choose to be someone else if that would get the message through better. And that can sound again, a lot of people with ego issues go, that sounds weak. If it's going to work, I don't care. But doing it the other way, I could play good cop, bad cop by myself. Just because I could sit there and be as really, really nice and friendly, but no one was ever sure whether I was stable. And so I developed that reputation, and I would hear older cons tell the young guys coming in, it's like, Miller's all right. He keeps his word. He does, but something a little bit off about him. Don't push it. And you can choose how you want to present. And that's the thing that I think we've been bouncing around is people think if it's a choice, there's something wrong about that. There's something morally, it's I'm manipulating. I'm always, if I'm communicating with you, I am manipulating you. I'm putting something in your head. But if I know that I can change my voice, use different words, and get it in your head better, why would I not do that?
Focusing on the goal rather than the ego.
Okay. As long as we're here.
Okay.
One of the things that makes TV so freaking hard to watch is almost every plot device is based on somebody doing something stupid. And they have to, I've noticed two things. half the plots of almost all the TV shows I've seen over the last year, if anyone had just said what they needed to say when they needed to say it, that whole hour episode would have been handled in 10 minutes and no one would have got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one I'm noticing is a Hollywood trope is whenever the characters get really introspective and start talking about their feelings and their choices, it's because the writer needs them to do something incredibly freaking stupid and has to, in order to keep the plot going, and so has to have them talk to make this really stupid thing sound sensible.
Yeah.
It's just, yes, I have a real tough time watching TV right now.
You want as just a total rabbit hole. You want a really good time, really wind yourself up. Get forced to watch a lot of Lifetime TV with your wife. That'll. Let's take a quick break for this vital message. Listener, do you get at least $3 a month worth of value out of I2H? You should see what we do for the Roving Horde Armada members. Check it out today by visiting I2H.net. Members receive access to the private I2H Armada Slack group where they get to connect, ask questions, get the news, escape the nonsense in their social media feeds, and shenanigans. Twice a month, members get together on a private virtual roundtable. We discuss guns, meat, news that matters, and other things you just can't talk about with anybody else. Access to members-only content and every episode ever produced. And that's just to name a few things you get with your membership when you sign up through I2H.net. In the Rabbit Hole is mostly kept on the air and supported by members just like you. Go to I2H.net to find out more and become part of the Roving Horde Armada. Now, back to today's guest. So, we went here, and I think we hinted at it. It might be pretty good if we break down, or if since it's your book, breaking down the difference between the lizard brain, the monkey brain, and the human brain, which we all wish we spent more time in than we probably actually do.
I can't remember the name of the psychologist right now, but there was this model in the 70s called the triune brain theory.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the science is terrible, but it's a really good model. And there have been a bunch of books come out in the last 10 years that have some variation of this thought. And this is another rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. And it was going like, what is going on here? Because this guy in the UK has never heard of my stuff, and I've never heard of his stuff. We're using almost a The Dragons of Eden. Carl Sagan published that in about 79 or 80. Mm. All the people that read it then that were really impressed by it and used it are now getting old enough to write their own books. But that was the first pop sci book about the triune brain theory. Mm-hmm. And it was a brilliant book. Carl Sagan writes some really good stuff. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so there are two models I like to use. I like using Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Largely, almost everyone has seen it. It's fairly well respected, and I can piggyback a lot of important information on it. Mm-hmm. So he's got that pyramid, and the base layer is your immediate survival. And I know you're asking about the other model, but I'm going to start with this one.
That's fine,
because this one's important for you guys.
You're in charge here. Go right ahead.
I'm in charge. So immediate survival. I'm on fire. I'm drowning. Tiger's chewing on my leg. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty.
That's a weird dream, but go ahead.
Right. Those are that class of problems.
I got it. I was just having fun with it.
Okay, cool. Next level up, security, which is I don't want that shit to happen tomorrow either.
Mm-hmm.
So steady food supply, clean water, place to sleep, protection. If those two are taken care of, you want to be in a group. Humans don't function well alone. Mm. Once you're in a group, next level up, you want to be valued by the group. You want to be valuable to them, and you want them to appreciate you. And what Maslow theorized, if you were secure in all four of those, you then become what he called self-actualized. You'd be your own person. You'd be doing what you wanted to do. You'd be living your own life. And it was always presented as this great, you're going to be a great artist, inventor, whatever. The reason why I think everyone has to be familiar with this is the type of conflict and violence you get from the different levels is qualitatively different. It's not variations on a theme. They're very, very different things. So if a tiger is chewing on your leg, then the way you're going to fight is not going to be with all of your fancy kung fu skills.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the one you're going to freeze. You're going to run. You're going to panic. You're going to wail. And we could talk about this. Civilians drowning victims, right? Is one that enough people have had water rescue classes. That's an easy thing to get into. It's like you do not go swim up to them and try to get in touch with their self-esteem issues.
Uh-huh.
It's not that problem.
Yeah.
The second level up, if you're hungry or your kids are hungry, you're going to hunt. You aren't going to fight. You aren't going to square off. You aren't going to give anyone else a chance. And if that drive is food, money, but drug addiction, you're a hunter. You aren't a fighter. And hunters beat fighters every time. The social levels that belonging and esteem, we do have a lot of experience that in conflict, if not violence. But it's scripted. It's designed not to get anybody hurt. It's predictable. This is teaching lessons or establishing dominance. One of the dangers is because we have so much experience at that level, we assume that if we're dealing with the drowning person or the bad drug reaction or the person who's hunting us to try to get enough money for drugs, that those skills will translate. And they're qualitatively different skills. Totally different thing. And at the top level, the self-actualized, in psychology, so you get there, you're going to be a really good person. If you're a self-actualized dick, you're a self-actualized dick. You hurt people because you enjoy hurting people.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at that, the people at that security level are looking at you as a walking ATM or as a resource. The guy at that level is looking at you as a toy. And not only will none of your social skills work, but he'll have fun playing them against you. It just makes it so much more sweet when you think you've negotiated and it was never a negotiation. He was just fucking with you and you're dead now.
Mm-hmm. And at that point, we're talking about true predators.
Yeah, it's one of the ways to look at it is that when you're doing what I call the social levels, that the belonging system, you're dealing with people. And when we deal with people, we always communicate. Fighting is just a very painful conversation. But if you track it, and this is totally subconscious and it's totally unnecessary, but if you and I are in a fight, I will subconsciously leave you space for you to do your piece. The whole timing of fight punching is to give the other person a chance to punch back. Okay, if I'm hunting you, you don't get that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that small of a mind twitch, but it opens up an entirely different world. Hunting is different than fighting. When someone can go into hunting mode, someone in fighting mode is almost certain to lose. So at that lower level, and there's definite skill issue. Unskilled beginner can be very, very dangerous. Beginning mugger, for instance, because they haven't learned how to be cold-blooded enough yet. It's a skill. So they often do set up, and it looks like they're trying to fight or intimidate, and then you get the old guy who's done it 100 times, and there's just it's just business.
Mm-hmm.
At the upper level, that self-actualized level, the person's not seeing you as a person, but as a toy, as his plaything, and you can do some very cruel things to a toy, and not lose any sleep over it. So that ability to see people as something other than people is the real defining thing. So we were talking about the model. So that first model to me is important because one of the things you can't necessarily talk your way out of someone that's using you as a toy. But if you can stay in, this is where we cross over, if you can stay in your human brain, you can manipulate the game. If you go to the lizard brain, you'll do anything to survive. You become very, very dangerous. It's your monkey brain where you have those voices saying, I'm not that kind of person. I could never do that. And that's what bad guys will work to keep you in that brain because you're predictable and you won't hurt them. So the monkey human lizard model is lizards, your survival instincts. It's you as an animal. in our society, most people haven't really experienced it, so they tend to either believe it doesn't exist, um, or they mystify it. Um, the people that have experienced it tended to have experienced it under an adrenaline dump.
Mm.
So they frequently think that it's this big, clumsy, raging beast. But it's not. This is you when you're in your perfect animal mode. When you're whatever, especially if you have a physical obsessive hobby and you hit the zone, that's when your lizard is working it.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right. That just clarified something for me. I got it. Okay.
Okay. The monkey is our our social selves, the one that always wants to fit in, that wants to be one of the people. And people say, no, I am me. I don't want to fit in anywhere, but they're trying to fit in with the people that say that.
Mm-hmm.
It's humans are incredibly tribal, and they have been for a long time. There are really good reasons for it. But some of those reasons are not relevant in a given situation, because one of our assumptions, for instance, if we're being attacked by someone, a person, our wiring assumes it's in our tribe, and our default is not to make our tribe weaker. So we tend to, again, fight instead of just assassinate.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who has gotten past that has a huge advantage. But that monkey brain is the voice in your head, the one that doesn't want you to do that much better than your parents, the one that decides that girl's out of my league, the one that, all of these things that we put leashes on ourselves to make sure that no one becomes extraordinary enough to change anything. That's the monkey. And we make so many of our decisions from there. And one of the things to just to play out a little thought experiment in the book, think of any time where you knew someone who made just an incredibly stupid decision, and ask them why, what were you thinking? And they always have this completely logical sounding reason.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what happened is the monkey made the decision for monkey bullshit reasons. And tons of examples of that. But as soon as the decision made, then the next thing is the monkey orders the human brain to come up with a good explanation why it wasn't stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And our human brain, which is incredible at solving problems, gets almost all of its exercise making excuses for the monkey brain decisions.
Mm-hmm.
It's so the human brain within this model, and we have to be really careful with some stuff, because there are different taxonomies, different ways to break down language, and they're all models. None of them are true. There is no lizard living in your head. There's no monkey living in your head. It's just a way to break it down.
Mm-hmm.
There's also subconscious or unconscious and conscious. It's a model. So the human brain is not necessarily the logical words in your head, because most of the words in your head are not actually all that logical. But the human brain is the one that actually gathers information before it makes a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And that, just because of that, I mean, if there was nothing else and there's other stuff, there's nothing else, that in itself would make it slower than the other two brains. So it's always playing catch up. Monkey hears the key word. I know who the good guys are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in my side. Yeah. Human actually listens to all of it and has doubts. Those doubts get suppressed really quick by the monkey.
Mm-hmm. Why is this important for people to understand the difference between these three parts of the brain?
So I have this horrible wise ass moment almost all the time where none of this is important. Nothing's important. You're going to die anyway. Get over it.
That's an answer too.
Yeah. The reason it's important is that most people don't recognize when they are going for a monkey win instead of a human win. And that's when you've got, it's not hard to put a bad guy in cuffs, as long as you're putting a bad guy in cuffs. If you're putting a bad guy in cuffs and proving to him that you're the boss, you're probably going to fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
When you stay in that, when you recognize, oh my God, I'm in my monkey brain, that means you're going to make emotional mistakes. You're going to get too excited. You're going to get too fearful. That to me is the most important thing. Well, is recognizing when you're playing the wrong game. There's also tools when you can become conscious of communication. You can do things that you can't unconsciously. You're going to need an example for that because that sounded vague even to me, and I said it.
Yeah.
So one of the things is I think it's in the Concom book. I know it's in the presentation. Is there's a very reliable way to make people fall in love with you.
Oh yeah, it's in the book. Yeah.
But one of the things that's not in the book is that there's an equally reliable way to make people stay in love with you and to stay in love with someone else. And there are two versions of love. There's the love, best friend, absolute comfort, but that romantic, this is still kind of hot and exciting love is nice. And and just bragging, my wife and I have been going on about 32 years, and she still takes my breath away. Mm-hmm. But part of that is, again, maintaining that adrenaline, which is the feeling of falling in love. I'm traveling all over the world, and she thinks I'm getting hit on by hot Hungarian spies all the time. And that's happened exactly once, but I will not let her forget it.
Well, right. Yeah. Can't let that go to waste.
Yeah. And I, every time I look at her, I go, oh my God, she could do so much better than me.
Mm-hmm.
But that little fear of loss, and then the little adrenaline spikes, just doing unexpected nice things for each other. Mm-hmm. It goes, every so often the roses, and also the really bad jokes. But there's a big movement within, especially within the martial arts community, about lives in balance, and balanced objects don't move. And that feeling of moving forward all the time. Anyway, if you don't know this stuff consciously, it's largely a matter of luck whether you're going to be successful, whether you're going to be happy, whether the relationship's going to go well or bad. And this can be a long-term relationship, or the guy you've got to put in new cuffs right now. Mm-hmm.
Or even a meeting at work.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't do that. I don't do that. But that's what makes conscious communication is just so much more effective than I'm just going to say some shit coming out of my head and hope it works out. Mm-hmm. And if you aren't conscious, that's what's happening. You have not planned. You haven't. And most of your instincts are based on, for that level at the monkey, the people we try to make happy. And I have to give an example of this, but the people we try to make happy tend to be a chimpanzee troop. Mm-hmm. If you want to go back at a really, really dumb decision that you made and think about it, odds are pretty good that it would have been the right decision. You've been trying to impress a chimpanzee. Mm-hmm. One of the examples, and I'm sure this is in the book, but this is super important. Almost everyone listening to this has at some point either said or at least thought or heard someone say, I don't want to apologize, I'll look weak. Mm-hmm. All right. But when you're in an argument, you think you're being reasonable, logical, and what's the other person?
A jerk, yeah.
Jerk, yeah, you can be meaner than that. Okay, what's he think?
The same.
Yeah, he thinks he's being reasonable, logical, and you're the one being a jerk. Mm-hmm. What does the audience see? Because I guarantee it's not two reasonable people.
Two chimpanzees.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the weird thing. So we've all had that voice in our head saying, I don't want to apologize, I'll look weak. Mm-hmm. But every time you've been in the audience and you've seen these two chimpanzees going at it, and all someone says, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I have no idea how that got so far out of hand. Mm. I apologize. Who's the leader?
The person who apologized.
Whose status goes up?
The person who apologized.
Okay. So from our own personal experience, we know that voice in our head is wrong. Mm-hmm. You don't look weak when you apologize. You look weak when you act like an out of control dick. Mm. But that voice, and again, if your chimpanzee, your monkey brain wants to read that as, oh, I can't throw that. That's a submission signal. Mm-hmm. And I can't throw a submission signal or I will never. So that's our wiring is really poor for the modern world.
That makes sense. And I think that really explains a lot, or I think that should put it in context for a lot of people of, not being the person that's walking around the room screeching like a chimpanzee and throwing feces. Like, sure, that gets other people to be quiet, but not productive, and you're not going to really reach your end goal.
Yeah, your monkey brain sees that and goes, "Oh, I must be a great leader because everyone's scurrying."
Yeah. Yeah. I think, it was funny when I read that. It was, it reminded me of very early when I was the first sort of management level I was in, where I had a bunch of people reporting to me. And I've often thought over the years of the different stages I went through while being in that role. And the one I'm most ashamed of was that first one, where I was the chimpanzee throwing feces, making lots of noise, and everybody just scurried off. And it's like, I'm in control. And no, really, I'm creating an environment where everybody's just trying to stay the hell away from me, and things
Yeah.
aren't really getting done.
Yeah.
So, and I think this leads us to the next part about, and I think all of this may start for some people. This may be a bit hard to swallow. We'd all like to believe we spend more time in our human brain than we probably really do. Can you explain in simple terms, the concept of scripts? Like we've talked about it a few times, but what are scripts?
Scripts are communication patterns that you don't have to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are fairly shallow. We all do them. You don't want to learn how to introduce yourself differently to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Rory. Handshake. How you doing? Boom. Script done.
Mm-hmm.
We've got that there. But it's more detailed than that. There's if you want someone to go off, there's a script that you could go on to get them to lose their temper. And I'm thinking from an officer's point of view.
Okay.
But there's also a script that then get to you lose your temper, and if you don't realize what the script is, you're being manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first scripts that I wrote about a lot was the monkey dance.
Mm-hmm.
The two young guys and what you looking at,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other one has to say some shit, and they say some shit, and they're closing up, trying to look as big as possible. The worst possible stance for a fight, and then a chest push or chest poke, and maybe a couple chest pushes and an overhand right. It's so predictable. But once you step back out of your monkey brain and into your human brain, almost all interactions are scripted. They're ridiculously predictable. One of the reasons why I included the love script in the book was, and it's kind of a cheap shot, but basically I want to say this is the most special thing in your universe. And it can be predicted, it can be manipulated, it can be created. It's almost completely mechanical.
Mm-hmm. It is a lot more than I think people have any idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And if something that special can be that mechanical and, soften it, that also means you don't need to hate anybody. That's just another script.
Mm-hmm.
But humans are good at mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
We're good at tools. That's not and a certain percentage of people take that as this terrifying, the world is this cold and bleak place. But hopefully the rest will sit there and go, I can become a good husband just by choosing to, and, I'm following the script, doing the things a good husband does.
Mm-hmm.
I can follow the good man script and be a good man. Or at least recognize when I'm following the not being a good man script and make some changes.
Mm-hmm. Hooks were also fascinating to me, partially because the concept keeps coming up in my own life in various areas. I know them as a thing that catches people's attention emotionally and gets them to engage. How would you describe them in the context of conflict communication?
This is a taxonomy thing, and one of the things I get a lot of in especially the physical self-defense, but also in communication to some extent, is a lot of people have their own life experience and stuff, and they've made up their own languages to describe what they see, and then they find that someone else has the same word with a completely different meaning. So the taxonomy is understanding the operational definitions is super important. So for me, hooks, because I see where you went with hooks there for advertising is where I was thinking about what you're talking about.
There was actually, yeah, there's advertising. There's also the pickup artist community. Yeah. There's a few other places, but yeah.
Okay. For me, a hook is when a bad guy wants to do something bad, but wants to blame you for it. So he needs you to get to say something that he can take as an insult or something that he can take as you started it. He has every intention of doing this bad thing, but he needs that justification to actually cross the line. And they don't consider any of their own actions to count. So I can go in and call you horrible, horrible name. And you say one horrible name back to me to try to get me to quiet down. It's like, hey, you call me. And at that point, I'm justified in doing what I was going to do anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was surprised to see how much in there. And I mean, I guess I've seen this in a few areas where there is a lot of justification that even when and I think we mislabel some people as predators, that it's like they're just an average run-of-the-mill thug. But those average run-of-the-mill thugs still need what seems like an elaborate system of needing validation, needing a reason, more so than I think most people would think they would need.
It's that Maslow thing. Everyone's a part of a community, and they want to be accepted in that community.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those communities are really messed up, but it's still there. And so we get the. I'm probably going to write about this because I think I just came up with something that'll disambiguate it. But
okay,
snitching. Well, what's the difference between tattling, snitching, and reporting?
That's an interesting question. Now that I think about it, I don't know.
I'm because they're the same action, but that's something I'm going to write about. But one of the things is I would get guys who's like, snitches get stitches, boom, boom. But the dude would threaten his own mother to get her to put money on his books. And it's just, but within his society, that was, or within his family, because I think his friends would have been really pissed if they'd heard that phone call. But within that, one is way worse than the other. So they're sticking within the standards within their group. Same. I'm sure that I could, if I thought about it a little bit, I could come up with similar things in the prepper community. There's stuff that you don't say, that you don't do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's one of those that no one outside the community would even notice. So everyone has their little rules, their little justifications. It's, which, by the way, I like yours. I went and read your overall website a little bit, but one of the things I really believe in strongly is that everything that makes you safer, better, also should improve your life. You shouldn't be doing situational awareness to be paranoid and scared all the time. It's because it makes the world more intense and more beautiful. It's if you have enough stuff to get through a storm, you don't have to worry about storms as much. You can relax more.
Exactly. You get to move up that Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, just by using your human brain to solve the lizard problems.
I like that. Yeah. There was an interesting section in the book, and I think this will take us someplace particularly interesting for preppers. Let's see. It says some post-event stress among survivors may come from a realization that what one is willing to do to survive is not compatible with self-image or even with internalized concepts of right and wrong. I think this is, like I said, this is a big point for survival and preparedness. If somebody's going to go down the really extreme route of things that could happen, I believe a lot of people in this tribe are aware of or think about how dark other people could go. But they're not necessarily aware and haven't spent enough headspace, in my opinion, about how dark they themselves can go in the context of a really traumatic, really dramatic situation. Can you share some thoughts on this? Like, situations make you dark.
I'm trying not to talk out both sides of my mouth here.
Okay.
One of my concerns is that most people can't go dark when they need to. I've talked to so many people that they think that they have this raging beast inside them, and if they ever lose control, they'll turn into, and they tell me the story about the last time they felt that anger, so they were provoked, and they're talking about their internal feelings of rage, and I'm looking, but you did exactly nothing. This this beast you're afraid of is an anemic chihuahua. You can relax. But that's when those people confuse their emotions with what they're willing to do.
That's good.
The ones that as criminals are the most dangerous ones that don't need to get worked up to do violence.
Mm-hmm.
Where that's considered a fairly low level. The violence they're using considered a low level option to them.
Mm-hmm.
Taking it from the other way, people will not be the same when they're hungry enough. You've read Elie Wiesel's Night, right?
No.
Survivor of the Auschwitz, I think, but one of the death camps.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the stories he tells is they were in a train going somewhere, and the Germans had found it amusing to toss a crust of bread into the cattle cars to watch the fights.
Mm-hmm.
Ellie watched a young man beating an old man almost to death for a crust of bread, and not even realizing it was his own father.
Mm.
And it was one of those people don't know what hunger will do to them.
Mm-hmm.
Long-term fear, sleep deprivation, and then the other side of that, and the thing that actually triggered that quote was a friend of mine in Chicago, accosted by 3 kids with knives, and he's competent, and he clicked fully into his lizard. His lizard brain started, this is how I'm going to kill them. And frequently I've seen this, I've heard about it a lot. Sometimes you make that decision, you make that switch, and people sense and back down. So these 3 kids that were triangulating, moving up weapons, just had a shock look and backed away.
Mm-hmm.
So everything perfect doesn't get better than that.
Mm-hmm.
But the next morning, the voices in his head started saying, you were fully prepared to kill a child. What the hell is the matter with you? What kind of monster would even consider that?
Mm.
And so the lizard was sitting there going, I'm going to live. This is what I need to do. It's on.
Mm.
But with a day of thinking, the monkey brain is totally tearing people up. And this is in a way related to survival guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Or survivor guilt, which is I think another aspect. I think all 4 things that we just talked about right now circle around that. What you're prepared to do, what you'll become if, and how you'll deal with it once you get enough rest to start looking at it from your normal brain.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And I think this brings up an important point in general. And you touched on it a second ago when you said, talked about you worry people won't go dark enough. Is passivity a virtue, or is it a dangerous lie modern society has told itself?
Did someone pay you to ask me that question?
No. I got it from somewhere else. Yeah.
Okay, because this has been one of my, I want to say crusades,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe. Somewhere in the last 20 or 30 years, passivity has become considered a virtue. Good people let other people solve their problems. That's what we used to call moral cowardice.
Mm-hmm.
The knowing what the right thing to do and an inability to act on it is okay. And pushing buttons here, that's barely fucking human.
Mm-hmm.
If you know the right thing to do and you can't act on it, that's completely beyond the pale. There is a book I ran into. I think it's possibly one of the worst books I've ever read.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, it's called The Science of Evil. But it was basically a guy cherry picking a whole bunch of fMRI studies to try to back up his belief that, anyway, a bunch of beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things he put in there, there's the old, basic philosophy course. Would you kill 1 person to save 5?
Mm-hmm.
And his answer in the book was, of course, that's the right thing to do, but only a sociopath could actually do it. He had literally defined moral courage as sociopathy.
Mm.
It was just unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
I'll throw out one other piece of this because I do say this a lot. The power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Can you think of a better way to keep good people weak than to tell them they'll magically turn into bad people if they get strong?
People like us don't do things like this.
Yeah, and that's so. Yes, the passivity thing. I'll rant on this as long and I'll push as far as you want, but basically, if you're not willing to act, you can't be either good or evil. You're just useless.
I think that summed it up right there. And I think not only useless to yourself, but useless to your tribe.
Yeah. The only reason to be passive is if you're just a less strain on resources then. Yeah.
What's a simple we've talked a lot of theory, we've talked a lot of this stuff to kind of get into 2 quick practical things people could do. What is a simple thing that people could do, a simple exercise to help them understand what things make them or what things make people look like victims to predators?
My favorite for that is to actually go to public places and start look for your victims. Sit there and use your subconscious more than your conscious. So don't try to, I'm going to look for short people with, it's one of those, you're better at reading people than you know. Most people are. So sit there and go, which one looks like a pork chop? And pork chop's a jail slang for anyway. But it's one of those. That's in my opinion, the best way to get into that is to reverse and be a predator. Figure out what you would look for if you were a predator, because we are natural predators. Is what we do. We have canine teeth and our eyes are in the front of our head. We know what those are for.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take very much to reawaken those instincts. And then once you know what you'd be looking for, you know what they're looking for. So I'm very heavy on game-based stuff. Go play. Go watch people as a sport.
Very good. What are some signs things in an interaction are about to go very badly?
We talked about the guys looking for hooks. The things that I look for most, and remember this is coming from a guy. Women have a slightly different list. The things I look for most are proxemics, how close they're standing, whether it's natural and unnatural distance, the power line, the line between their feet where that's pointed. If the only way someone can move fast and telegraphed is on the line between fast and untelegraphed is on the line between their feet. If that's pointing at my center line, that's very unnatural. If it's doing that and they're in range, people in our culture don't stand face to face unless they know each other within striking range. It's for other people, longer term. As a rule, anyone that doesn't respect your boundaries doesn't respect you. And a lot of anywhere from low level creepers to high level creepers will push boundaries to see whether or not they're real. Anyone that tries to separate you from your resources intends to victimize you. If someone tells a little kid, "Don't tell mom or your daddy," there's no good reason to have that kid's 2 primary resources cut off. If someone doesn't want you to have your own bank accounts, or thinks all your friends are a drag, or tries to cut ties with your family, or doesn't want you to train, no one who cares about you actually wants you weak. Someone trying to separate you from resources is trying to weaken you, and there's no good reason for someone to want you weak. Those are enough for now. I do a threat assessment class sometimes, but
sounds good.
Yeah.
So someone listens to this or sees it, and they think this Rory guy, this guy's my brand of wacky. How do they connect with you? What is the best way to find out about your books and find out about your seminars and stuff like that?
My website is chirontraining.com, CHIRON training.com. And there's a link, email link on there. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not giving you my phone number.
But what if I really need to call you at 2:00 in the morning?
Pretty much anyone that needy doesn't get my phone number.
Good man. Good man.
Yeah.
So, you put out a lot of books on violence and in this field. What's the big thing that you want? What's the big picture here for you? What are you trying to put out into the world?
I'm not sure that exists. The first book was I'm going to say accidentally published.
Okay.
I was having a really bad year. And for the first time, I was really good up for the first 15 years or so at not taking stuff home. I didn't lose any sleep. I was good. And had a big year. There was a first body recovery working with search and rescue, blew a hole in somebody, just this whole list of out looking for a young teenager horrible things had been done. Friend committed suicide. It was not a good year. And for the first time, it wasn't, go to sleep, go work out, I'm fine. The stuff was drifting out of my head. So I started writing to get it out of my head. I wanted to poke at it on paper because I was failing at poking at it in my head. And when that was done, I sent it to some friends. One of those friends was Chris Wilder, and Chris Wilder goes, "Hey, he actually called me and says, I happened to be on the phone with my publisher when you sent me that thing. So I just sent it on to him. I hope you don't mind." So the first one was an accident. And I don't think I ever would have tried to publish something that personal. But it resonated with some people. And then the second book was, if that's the question, what's the difference between training and violence? What's my best shot at the answer? So that was Facing Violence. And then after that, writing became a habit, an addiction. I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So now, what was that website address one more time?
ChironTraining.com. ChironTraining, and the .com everyone can figure out for themselves.
Right. Well, awesome. Well, Roy, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. And I hope that the audience really took a lot away from all this.
I hope so too. It was fun. Thank you.
Show notes, links to Rory and his books and other resources can be found by going to intherabbithole.com/E271. Get more survival goodness and help support the show. Visit itrh.net to become part of the roving horde armada. It's members just like you who help keep the lights on. Again, visit itrh.net. Now, hey, if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to do all the YouTube stuff. Like this video, subscribe, and slap that bell around because bananas are yellow. With that, we wrap up episode number 271 from the Lone Star State. Till next time, stay safe and sound.